Good morning, everyone. Welcome to another Rookie Card Collector 123 video. Today's video, I wanted to talk about the 25 baseball players that I most actively collect these days. Share a little bit about my thinking, why I'm pursuing these players. Also talk a little bit about their specific cards and the different eras that they originate from. And just kind of a fun video. Nothing too in-depth or no cards to show today, but trying to just share some insight and maybe provide some good points that others may find and decide to possibly collect some of these guys that I've been going after. So I'll start out with some of the most obvious ones. Number one being Babe Ruth, the most obvious. Of course, Ruth being the pitcher slash outfielder, kind of in the same mold as Shohei Ohtani before Shohei. And of course, Ruth played the first part of his career with the Red Sox, and then in 1920 joined the Yankees for the remainder of his career, other than the final season, 1935, with the Boston Braves. So Ruth, anything in the Boston Red Sox uniform, which is the 1916 to 1919, nothing really affordable in my price range that I can collect in there. I don't have that kind of money to go after any of those things, especially with the market being what it is these days. So I try to collect the Ruth stuff. I do is typically the early 1920s. I prefer the advertising type cards as opposed to the strip cards, and of course the images that I like. Everybody's taste is going to be different as far as that goes. And of course, value-wise, the cost of Babe Ruth cards these days, everything I'm looking at is generally in the 1 to 2 kind of grade range. A lot of 1.5s I have. A couple of the lesser value cards I have a little bit higher. But that's, Babe Ruth, the most obvious. The Gowdy cards today seem to be the number one in popularity. But overall, probably the number one most widely collected pre-war player. Second one I like to collect is Honus Wagner. Another obvious choice, one of the first 5 inaugural Hall of Famers, along with the Babe. Wagner's, he's got a couple of things in the very end of the 19th century. There were oversized premiums. And then beginning in the 1902 era, he's got a couple of super expensive early Wagner items in there. He's in the Sporting Life set and the Bryce Williams set. I can't afford any of those. So I really gravitate more towards the caramel card era. I tend to like the caramel cards in general more so than the tobacco cards. All from that same 1909, 1910, 1911, 1912 era. I don't know. To me, a lot of the caramel cards, the colors just seem to be a little more dramatic as opposed to the tobacco cards. Of course, there's exceptions to that. But so I try to go after as many of the Wagner caramel type cards as I can. Also, other advertising mediums as well. Wagner's another one, along with Ruth, whose cards have gotten extremely expensive these days. So a lot of them I can't afford. But I try to find nicer presentation, again, in the 1 to 2 kind of grade range. Third player I've been collecting is Ty Cobb. Another all-time great, another obvious choice. His earliest cards are primarily the postcards from the Detroit Tigers team series from 1907. Then you get into the tobacco and caramel card era. Cobb has more on the tobacco side, obviously, than Wagner, and but does have plenty of caramel cards, and his career extended almost through the entire decade of the 20s as well. So there's really price points for just about everybody if you want to collect Cobb cards. If you start to look at some of the 20s, exhibits and the strip cards, you can get those. A lot of those you can get for hundreds of dollars, under 1,000. The earlier cards, probably not so much, but the T201s and T202s, the double folders and the triple folders, most of the time those are not super expensive. And Cobb, of course, another all-time great. The fourth player I'd like to collect, and this is probably maybe the toughest out of the entire group of 25 that I'm going to cover today, is Shoeless Joe Jackson. And the main reason for him being what I would say is the toughest of the entire group is he's got the fewest cards out there. And I'm one who doesn't really prefer strip cards so much. So that eliminates a couple of his most popular cards right off the bat, being strip cards. So other than that, you get into his rookie card, which is super expensive in any kind of decent shape. It's almost a six-figure card now. His Cracker Jack cards, his Sporting News cards, and Collins McCarthy, all those 1917 sets that are related. Just about everything Joe Jackson is out of my price range. There's a couple of playing game cards, National Game and Tom Barker Game. And he's in a couple of oversized supplements, but really a really tough one to try to collect if you're on at least somewhat of a limited budget. Next one I'm going to cover is probably kind of the cutoff from the really top tier Hall of Famers and then down to the next level would be Lou Gehrig, in my opinion. He kind of falls somewhere in between the best of the best and then the next best. Obviously, these are all great players I'm going to cover today. All 25 of them were fantastic players. So nothing derogatory towards any of them. It's just, there's different levels of greatness, I guess. Gehrig runs through the 20s and throughout the entire decade of the 1930s. And again, he's got several exhibit cards. If I had to choose, I prefer the exhibit cards over the strip cards, even though they're more of an oversized postcard type thing. I know a lot of people don't consider them cards really, but I prefer those over the exhibits. And then, of course, the 30s, you get into the Gaudis and the DeLongs, and there's lots of nice Gehrig cards during the 30s. There's also several 4-on-1 exhibits in the 30s. Those are not as much a favorite of mine. I prefer the player having the full card, like the 20s Gehrigs are. Next one I like to collect is Christy Mathewson. I've only got one card of his right now, so kind of lacking in cards of him. Similar to Joe Jackson, I only have one Joe Jackson. Mathewson begins right at the turn of the century, so he's got nothing 19th century, but right after 1902, you start getting into some of his real expensive rookie era stuff, his Sporting Life cabinet, his Bryce Williams card, and then moving forward from there into the tobacco and caramel card era. And then his career kind of wound down in the mid-19 teens. So he's not in the Sporting News set or the Collins McCarthy or any of those. So Mathewson is not a hard one to find. There's some fairly affordable Mathewsons that are in the tobacco and caramel card era, as well as some more oddball type of stuff. There's there's a couple of pennants out there. Different things, more so than the traditional cards, but there's plenty of Mathewson tobacco cards. He's in the T202 set, the T205, the T206 multiple times, and then he's in various caramel card issues from the early 19 teens as well. Next one I'm going to talk about is Walter Johnson. Again, another player right now. I currently only have one card of Walter Johnson. Probably the greatest pitcher overall in baseball history. A lot of people, I think, feel that way. He started right at the end of the first decade of the 20th century. So nothing much prior to 1909, 1910 for Walter Johnson. But he runs again through almost the entire decade of the 20s. So he's on a lot of strip cards. He's on the Cracker Jacks, the Sporting News, the Collins McCarthy's, and then a lot of exhibit cards during the 20s as well. So again, Johnson's another one that, for strip cards and exhibit cards during the 20s, you can pick up several of those, probably under $1,000 also. So fairly affordable. Next one I'm going to mention is Cy Young. Cy Young actually spans almost 50-50 his career between 19th century and 20th century. Card-wise, it's predominantly 20th century. His only 19th century cards are the very early, very rare meaning like one of a kind, or maybe two examples known of a couple of his early Cleveland Spiders cards. And then at the end of the 19th century, he was on a couple of oversized supplements from the Sporting News. And as you move forward into the 1902 and beyond, he's again Sporting Life and Bryce Williams, and then into the tobacco and the caramel cards. And then his career ended right around that time, 1910, 1911. So Cy Young, there's cards tend to be a little more expensive, and he doesn't run beyond the 1910 era. So there's nothing in strip cards or exhibit cards for him. So in general, tougher to find Cy Young at an affordable price range. But another guy, somebody I enjoy collecting, and I've been fortunate to more recently pick up a few of his cards. So I'm doing a little better in the Cy Young collection. Next up is going to be Grover Cleveland Alexander. He's one that may be more on the underrated side. Based on the numbers he compiled over his career, and looking at prices of his cards. He began his career in the early 19 teens, so he's in all the Cracker Jacks, the Sporting News, all those sets. And then as you get through the 20s, he's in almost all the 20 sets from all the exhibits, the strip cards, the caramel cards again in the 20s. And his stuff is more affordable probably than anybody that we've talked about so far. And he's also, he's in some of the major sets. He's not so much in some of the other more obscure sets for whatever reason. Sometimes they did not include Alexander. So a good option to look for, like I said, possibly undervalued. Next one I collect is going to be Eddie Collins. Among second baseman in history. If you look at his career offensive numbers, he's probably close to being on par with Hornsby from primarily in the National League. Eddie Collins was an American League guy, and both of them had tremendous career batting averages and lots of league leadership titles in various offensive categories. Collins began his career in the later 1900s, the first decade. So he's in all the caramel, tobacco card issues, in through the teens and the Cracker Jacks and the Sporting News. And then as you get into the 20s, he's in several of the exhibit sets and also the strip cards. So there's lots of different stuff for Collins, probably even more so than Grover Alexander. Collins is probably even more underrated. And his stuff seems to be a bargain a lot of times for various different sets that I collect. And so I've recently picked up a few different Eddie Collins items. Next one I'm going to mention is Tris Speaker. Kind of falls into the same time frame, the same category as Collins. Although Speaker was an outfielder, Collins was a middle infielder. So Collins' career numbers offensively is even more impressive to me, being a middle infielder where Speaker played outfield. But Speaker also great all-around player, great defensive center fielder, great hitter, put up fantastic career numbers. Began his career around the same time, 1910 or so. So he's in all of the 19 teens, Cracker Jacks, Sporting News, and then into the 20s with the strip cards, the exhibit cards, and split his career again almost equally between Boston and Cleveland, both in the American League. Next one I'm going to talk about is Nap Lajoie, or Napoleon Lajoie. Lajoie began his career in the late 19th century. He's in a couple of the oversized premiums from 1898, 1899. Then we move into the 20th century, and he's in the 1902, 1903 era, the Sporting Life cabinets, and the Bryce Williams set. And then you move into, he's still in baseball through almost the entire decade of the 19 teens. So he's in all the tobacco sets, the candy sets, the Cracker Jacks, the Sporting News. Lots of good options for Lajoie. Not quite as undervalued or not quite as underrated as maybe Collins or Alexander, but definitely significant difference price wise when you get comparing Lajoie to guys we mentioned earlier like Gehrig and Cobb and Wagner. Next one I'm going to mention is George Sisler. Not a lot of people talk about him. Maybe not as many people collect him. He tended to be primarily a great offensive player, more so overall hitting ability as opposed to power, and very excellent fielding first baseman as well. And I believe for his time, he also was one of the faster first basemen as far as running the bases and putting up numbers in the stolen base category amongst first basemen. Sisler began his career in the mid-19 teens, so he's got rookie cards in the Sporting News set, and then also the Collins McCarthy, and then into the 20s with the strip cards and the exhibit cards. Sisler cards, there's a lot of bargains out there, I think, for him as well, kind of similar to Eddie Collins and Alexander. Next one we're going to talk about is Rogers Hornsby. As I mentioned before, along with Collins, probably the two best middle-hitting second basemen of all time offensively. Hornsby put up phenomenal numbers for any position player and had a 5-year stretch where he famously batted, I believe 401 was his average, composite average for the 5-year period. A lot of his stuff, based on the numbers he put up, compared to like a Babe Ruth or a Wagner or a Cobb, he's usually several tiers down in terms of price and value of his cards. And his numbers, maybe not quite at the level of those guys, but probably not. His numbers were not several tiers down as his card prices are. So somewhere in there, I think there's some room for growth with Hornsby. And, he may be one of the more significantly undervalued players, in my opinion. Next one I'm going to mention is Jimmy Fox. Fox came up in the mid-20s, so he's in the exhibit card sets. He came after most of the strip cards were already done. He's in one or two strip card sets, and then you get into the 30s with the Gaudis and the 4-on-1 exhibits. And then some of the other play ball issues as you get into the later 30s and start moving toward the 40s. Fox, again, another player kind of similar to Hornsby based on his overall numbers he put up. Not super far behind guys like Ruth and Gehrig, but in terms of value, he's very far behind. So, again, I think another potential player whose stuff could be undervalued somewhat right now and could stand to see price jumps in the future. Next one I'm going to cover is Mel Ott. Ott, of course, great left-handed hitting outfielder for the New York Giants. He came up in the late 20s and really established himself around 1930. Leading home run hitter in the National League during the 30s, and then he played into the early 40s as well. Again, similar to Fox, he's in the 30s Gaudi sets, play ball sets, 4-on-1 strip cards, 4-on-1 exhibit cards. Lots of that stuff. Odd prices are pretty reasonable, even more affordable than Fox or Hornsby for sure. And, a good player to pursue. I enjoy collecting Mel Ott stuff. I've got a few different things. Next up is Joe DiMaggio. DiMaggio, I've been collecting actively and picking up things here and there. I'm primarily, more than anything else, a rookie card collector, of course. So I've got several of his different 36 issues. Don't have the C-Nuts right now anymore. Those have gotten really pricey. And he's got some really iconic cards when you get into the play ball, the 38 Gaudi heads up set, and the play ball cards. I really like the 41, which is the one in color. DiMaggio stuff brings pretty solid prices. I would not say his stuff is too undervalued. He's a significant star, and of course all the world championships with the Yankees, playing with Lou Gehrig, all that stuff builds into the cost of his cards. So next one I'm going to mention, similar time frame as Ted Williams. Williams came up in 39, and he has cards in a lot of the 40 sets. And then as you get into the 50s, he had some contract squabbles between Topps and Bowman, and kind of went back and forth with which sets he appears in for which company. Williams stuff prices tend to be pretty strong, and he's in almost all the mainstream card sets from the 1940s and 50s, outside of the contract issues he had a couple of times. Next one I'm going to mention is Jackie Robinson. Now we're getting into the sort of the borderline pre-war, post-war guys. Robinson's the first one, really, that's going to fall almost 100% on the post-war side. His stuff, of course, in the last few years has gone crazy, skyrocketed, and rightfully so. His place in history will never change, never be forgotten. So definitely somebody to pay attention to. Some of his higher end stuff has gotten, at least for me, out of my comfort zone. My focus tends to be more these days on pre-war, and if I want to have the funds to buy that kind of stuff, I can't pick up very many Jackie Robinson cards at the price points that they're at these days. So I've got a few. Most of them I've had for a good while now, and happy with those. Next one I'm going to mention is Hank Greenberg. So now again, going back to the pre-war guys, Greenberg came up into the majors in the mid-1930s with the Tigers. He's in all the major sets through the 30s and into the Gaudi heads up and the play balls in the 40s. And all the way up until the mid-40s, the bread sets, the Bond bread, not the Bond bread, the sets that went up to around 1945 or so for Greenberg. Next one I'm going to mention is Lefty Grove. Grove spent several years in the minors with Baltimore before joining the Philadelphia A's in the mid-1920s. So he appears in some of the 20s exhibit cards and then a bunch of the 30s 4-on-1 exhibits. Not very few strip cards. The strip cards were mostly finished by the time Grove became a star. He's in all the 30s Gaudi sets and, again, play balls, those issues. And Grove definitely one of the more underrated great pitchers in history, maybe a top 5 all-time pitcher. His prices do not match up with the Christy Mathewsons, the Walter Johnsons, or the Cy Youngs. He's kind of almost in similar price range to Grover Alexander. So definitely some bargains, I think, out there for Lefty Grove, depending on what set, which cards we're talking about. The last 4 I'm going to cover, these are all now 100% post-war guys, and they're the 4 biggest, most obvious names, so it's going to be Mickey Mantle, Willie Mays, Hank Aaron, and Roberto Clemente. They're all in the golden era, the 50s, 60s era of vintage pre-war or vintage card collecting. I'm not going to go into too many details. You all know what cards they appear on. They're all generally in that same time frame. They appear in mostly all the same sets. And of course, Mantle out of the four is by far the most widely collected, commands the highest values, followed by Maze and Aaron. And actually, Clemente, more recent times, a lot of the more oddball stuff, Clemente usually surpasses both Aaron and Maze in a lot of the oddball sets from the 60s and early 70s at least. With Mantle, of course, maintaining the number one status during the Golden Age era. So that's going to wrap up this video. Just wanted to share a little bit about the 25 guys that I primarily collect. You can see it's very heavily weighted towards pre-war. Really, the last 5 or so guys I mentioned fall on the post-war side, and most of them are cards that I had for several years now. I'm not really actively looking to collect any more Aaron's or Maze or Clemente for the most part. So anyway, hope you enjoyed today's video. Maybe picked up a player or two that sounds interesting and might want to explore trying to search for your own collection. But feel free to leave comments about thoughts in the section down below. Love to see some feedback. And otherwise, hope you enjoyed today's video. Have a great day, and I'll catch you guys again on the next one.